Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the rumours of the Demons' demise have been greatly exaggerated as the D's piled on over 100 points for only the fifth time since 2023. Was this an aberration, a blip, or are we back on track? Joining me tonight to answer those questions is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Bin Man. Good evening to all our listeners who are tonight foregoing a boring leaders debate and hoping for yet another of Angry Andy's political statements.
I'll talk more about my angry rant in a moment, but also joining us back tonight, full of confidence and walking on air, is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonland posse. I'm not sure about walking on air, but it was a blessed relief walking from the G this time and being able to listen to the wrap up of the game until it lasted. That is, and on the train home with the view to watching the replay when I got home. And it was so many times it seems in the last 12 months as leaving the MCG. So I tell you what, I told myself a complete and utter lie. I said on Demonland and said to mates is that I think last week on the show that I don't really care if we win or lose. That what I really want to see is effort and intensity and the players really having a dip. And I saw that, and so that was fantastic. 3/4 time, I was thinking I really, really don't want us to lose this game. So I was beyond thrilled with our performance. It was a super exciting day of the footy. I felt like there was a fair bit bubbling over at the game for me as a fan, and it sort of felt a bit like that on the field. But leaving all of that aside is just, sometimes sit back and watch footy just as a sport and think, how exciting was it, Kozzy? Like, how just thrilling was it to watch him play footy? And I love watching footy with a red Sharon. It's just how footy should be played.
Yeah, I do too. Before we start talking about the game, each week I do invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We truly appreciate the feedback, and as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share their reviews. And this one's a one out of left field because Left Arm of God gave us a 5-star review, but he's taken aim at the coach, and for context, this was written a week ago, and he's also taken aim at you, Bin Man, for giving the coach a pass. And I can't read out all of his review for legal reasons. Leave that up to your imagination. But he writes, Bin Man, your love for Goodwin has reached sickening levels. Can you please listen to what you're saying? You're successfully diagnosing the issues with the club at the moment: communication, accountability, effort, but somehow absolving the most influential cog, the coach, from that. Extraordinary. You had a go at Brad Green for referencing the third quarter. Do you know who referenced it 4 times in their press conference? This guy has an obvious lack of accountability for his guys for so long. More interested in being mates with them and in love with them than challenging them. And that's why you see repeated terrible habits from the likes of Oliver, 𝗟𝗡, etc., and what now looks like a plateau in development of younger players. And then there were a couple of sentences that I had to redact. Stop giving him a pass every week. Well, that wasn't so much of a review of the podcast, but he did find the loophole that gets his message across, which is leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. So well done for that. Big man, we have a couple of questions on Goodwin a little bit later on, but before you respond to the reviewer, this is from Demonland poster dstar9, and I'll read it and then you can respond to both. dstar9 writes, it should be an interesting podcast this week. I was at the GWS game, and despite the loss, I was genuinely excited by what I saw. It was a great game to watch. Like everyone, I've been disappointed by our recent losses, but I learned a long time ago that win or lose, I no longer pay attention to the media coverage of the MFC. I only listen to Simon Goodwin. and whichever player does the post-match interview. Somewhere along the way, we seem to have forgotten that we're watching a game of football. The level of scrutiny, analysis, and dissection has become ridiculous. I haven't even been listening to the Demonland podcast lately because it's gotten quite depressing. I did listen to a bit of the Bombers podcast, though mainly because Big Man is often the voice of reason. That said, I was disappointed to hear you drift away from your usual mantra of listen to 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝘁𝗍. He's been clear and consistent in his messaging. We're implementing a new game plan. We're confident in it. There'll be some hiccups, but in footy, things can change quickly. We now have a healthier list, which means we can start dropping players based on form, and that added depth is crucial. Our senior players are also beginning to find form again. I don't expect us to win every game, but I can clearly see the direction that we're heading. Goodwin took 7 years to build a game plan that brought us the ultimate success. He's now building a new system around exciting young talent, and this time it won't take 7 years. He deserves our respect. So, Big Man, you can respond to both of those.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll work backwards from 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝗀𝗏. And yeah, look, I think it's a really good question. And to be honest, on reflection, 𝗍𝗂𝗋𝗀𝗏 for me for last week is that, I think as I said at the top of last week's show, I hadn't processed the loss against the Bombers coming into the podcast, hadn't done any sort of meaningful analysis or even looked at the game. And, I think I would have preferred if I had have processed it before. So it was certainly a note to self to process the game before I hit the podcast, because the sort of red mist was definitely there. So I have absolutely processed this win. I've watched the replay twice, and I've watched the footy shows this week for the first time all year, and read about it, and I've been on Demonland. So I processed it this week. It's easy after a win. But look, I think that's a reasonable comment from 𝗍𝗂𝗁𝗏, and I on reflection, when I talk about the stats in a sec, I'll sort of pick up some of the things of being overly negative last week. I felt like I was in terms of the view. I've used this gag before, but MFCSS is a bit like herpes, that it never goes away and flares up at times of stress. And so I'm blaming last week's my performance on a flare-up of MFCSS after 5 losses and heebie-jeebies of thinking back to the bad old days, and we've had plenty of them. So I think that's a really fair comment from 𝗍𝗂𝗁𝗏. In terms of the first, the reviewer, what was the reviewer's name, Andy?
It was the left arm of God. Left arm of God.
In terms of that, look, and it's funny because I asked you to pair those two together, because if 𝗍𝗪9 had probably listened to a bit more of the Bombers podcast last week, I think that it'd be fair to say, in fact, that which is what left hand of God is talking about, I think, is that in fact I put it on the players, not 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏 last week, and I think that just in terms of left hand of God's comments is that 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏 does deserve our respect. I think he's an underrated coach tactically. We'll dig into that game a little bit from a tactics front. He had he gave Longmuir an absolute tactical bath on the weekend. As Simpson noted, there was a really interesting clip I saw on Demonland of Simpson and Longmire talking about 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏 and the challenges of that Simpson faced trying to create a new game plan, and it was actually really interesting. He said he failed in doing so. He made the point that I've made before about Goodwin, that this is the second time Goodwin has tried to implement a brand new game plan. So he went from that attacking model that was really innovative, that arguably drove the introduction of the 6-6-6, that flying V off the halfback flank and that aggressive ball movement, to a defence-first, zone-based game based on trapping in the forward half that became the template for footy for a while, or, building on Richmond. And now he's doing it a second time. So Simpson made the point that that's no small feat, and I think that's 𝗍𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 point. Just as a general thing, I'm really, really firmly of the view that the role of the coach, because I think left hand of God notes about the most important person in the equation is the coach. I totally disagree with that. Like I said last week, I personally think the most important thing in a football club is a good governance system. I just think that the history shows that clubs with good off-field, stable governance and boards and management CEOs and footy departments are much more likely to be successful. Like, history is clear on that. So I think that's number one. Personally, I think the fitness department is, if not more important, equally important to the coach. But above all, I have an absolutely unwavering opinion and belief that, in fact, it's the players who determine success. You just have to see how Clarkson struggled. It's legion. The number of legendary coaches in sport, world sport, not just football, who have been incredibly successful at a club, who have gone to another club and been hopeless. Had hopeless is unbelievable how frequent that is. Like Phil Jackson at the Chicago Bulls didn't win a thing after he left Chicago Bulls. There's any number of examples, and we've got an example now with Clarkson. Clarkson, outside his incredible success at the Hawks, has been one of the most unsuccessful coaches in many a year since he left the Hawks. So I actually personally think it's completely overrated. And last week I put it on the players. So I won't back away from that, and they really performed this week. I agree with 𝗍𝗲's comments about Goody deserving respect, and he's our coach. I value loyalty, and I'm going to back our coach in.
All right. Well, I think you can only leave one review per username on Apple Podcasts. So if Left Arm of God responds, we might just have this back and forth thing, because I think you can edit the review that you give. So it could be the world's smallest form of social media, just this back and forth based on one review on Apple Podcasts. Yeah,
it's the future.
Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will give you a shout out on the show. But don't if you want a conversation with us, don't do it through leaving a review. Get on Demonland, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, you can do that under our weekly podcast posts, or just slide into our DM. That's another way, Left Arm of God, that you can contact us. Don't worry, won't read out your full name on the air. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of our favourite podcasting apps. And in addition, you can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. Search for Demonland podcast to find the channel, and don't forget to subscribe. And this is where you can, this is for you, Left Arm of God. If you want to connect with other passionate Demon fans, you want to check out the Demonland forum, head on over to demonland.com, sign up, join in the conversation. You can discuss all these things with Binman and also fellow D supporters across Australia and around the world. So if you want to jump on the air tonight, that's another way, Left Arm of God. You can and have your say on any of the topics that we're covering. Give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute and bring you in when there's a break in the conversation. If you want to call that number during the week, leave a message. We'll play that out on the show. And our chat room, it's back. So if you're listening live, come join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast and be part of the discussion in real time. You need to be a member of Demonland to do that. And we do go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. I'm going to get into the match overview. The Demons snapped a 5-game losing streak and won their first match of the 2025 season in emphatic style, defeating Fremantle by 10 points at the MCG. It was their first win in 245 days, and the performance showcased renewed aggression, intensity and flair, particularly up forward. Coach Simon Goodwin had promised a return to a hard-to-play-against brand of footy, and his team delivered, applying intense pressure early and executing a fast, direct game plan that left Fremantle stunned. Melbourne booted 12 goals in the first half, eclipsing their average score for the entire season, 61 points, by halfway through the second quarter. Kozzy Pickett was simply electric. The 23-year-old live wire booted 5 goals from 24 disposals, including 4 in a dazzling first half that earned comparisons to Cyril Rioli from Isaac Smith on Triple M. He also laid 4 tackles and had 6 score involvements by halftime, single-handedly breaking open the game. And the Dockers, reportedly interested in trading for Pickett, were made to rue their ambition as Pickett increased his trade value dramatically. President Brad Green's tongue-in-cheek remark that Pickett was worth 3 first-round picks might now be an understatement. Melbourne dominated centre clearances 20-11 and were able to capitalise on them, a stark contrast to their struggles in the previous 5 rounds. Max Gawn was superb in the ruck, using his experience to exploit Sean Darcy and recording 7 centre clearances himself. I think that was actually 10. His third quarter defensive spoiling was also crucial as Fremantle mounted a challenge. Christian Petrarca, Jack Viney and Clayton Oliver were the mainstays in the engine room, with Viney adding a first quarter goal and applying some great pressure. With Bailey, Fritsch and Jacob Van Ruin dropped, the Demons debuted a new look forward line. Harrison Petty returned to attack, booting 4 goals and providing a strong aerial presence. Pickett and Chandler were both lively at ground level, booting 7 goals between them. The changes brought renewed structure to Melbourne's forward entries, a stark improvement from previous rounds. And despite missing Stephen May and Jake Lever, the Demons' defensive unit held up remarkably well. Tom McDonald restricted Tracy to 1-1, while Daniel Turner was leading the ground for intercepts before being subbed off with concussion. Trent Rivers, 26 disposals and a goal, played his best game of the season, highlighted by a match-saving goal line tackle on Jai Amos in the final quarter. Jake 𝗟𝗯𝗀 was unleashed off the back of the square and was pivotal in launching rebound attacks with speed and confidence. Draftees Harvey Langford and Xavier Lindsay continued to impress, with Langford kicking 2 goals, including a clutch goal that iced the game. Colton Tholstrup, returning from his bone stress injury, only had 6 disposals but laid 4 important tackles and showed some great defensive awareness. This was what many D's fans have been waiting for. With an intense, aggressive brand of footy and a retooled forward line, the Demons finally put together a performance that showed they still have life in season 2025. With Richmond and West Coast to come, the Demons have a real chance to string together wins and turn their season around. More importantly, they may have rediscovered the formula that made them a premiership threat not so long ago. Was this a one-off? Stay tuned. So, big man, before you take it away with your stats file, your nemesis, the Pearl, has returned.
George
I don't believe that. He says, Big Man has conceded recently the stats sometimes contradict what we've seen with our eyes. This week's stats file will be a feast of pressure acts and tackles inside 50. However, Bin Man, beware that a blend of some data and a desperate desire for an answer does not completely make sure that an accurate point of view can be extracted from the greater body of data. How do you measure what is going through Max's mind, or what might be Viney's motivation? So, Bin Man, before you get into the feast of pressure acts and tackles inside 50 stats, do you want to reply to the Pearl? Everyone's attacking you, Bin Man.
I'm not really sure what the appropriate response is, but if there is some stats around Viney's mental sort of approach to the game, I'd love to know it, because he was awesome, wasn't he, on the weekend? His best game for a very long time, and there's a question that we'll talk about a bit later around tagging, but I thought he was fantastic, and Max was back to his brilliant best. So, look, again, stats in of themselves are only numbers, and it's about how you look at them and aggregate them and bring them together to help understand the game. It's as simple as that. So, and I don't know that I've ever, I don't think that stats, there's a good sort of thing around the player rating that I'll talk a bit later. But yeah, I'll tell you, when I'm watching a game, I don't look at any stats. And so I'm so emotionally invested at the footy, you wouldn't believe it. And, I don't even know who's playing on the opposition when I watch the footy live. And it's only when I watch the replay, and even this time I was so excited. When I got home and watched the replay, it was like watching it live again. So it was only the second time I watched the replay that I drilled down. And as I've noted before, I don't really feel like I've getting a full sense of the game until I've read Willow's stats the next day and got a handle on some of the stuff. So each their own is what I say.
Well, this is your stats file, so you can continue. I'd put myself on mute. I was ready to have a little nap for about half an hour, so you can go ahead.
Well, I don't know, the Pearl, a bit of pearl of wisdom, but maybe there is some data that we could explore around the psychology, which is what he's touching on there. So, and just a shout out to another 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗀 while I'm in the 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗀 business, as Garbo points out correctly in the chat room, the pod chat room, which is worth going into if anyone is listening and wants to ask questions or make a comment or point out when I'm wrong. Phil Jackson coached another 5 championships after he left the Bulls, using largely the same technical approach Garbo notes. That's true. So that was a bad example to give. So let's go into the stats file, and hopefully this is all accurate. None of it's from ChatGPT, although that wasn't. That was BI, Bin Man Intelligence flaw there. So one of the things I think about last week in terms of not doing any analysis and not sort of processing that loss against the Bombers before the podcast was, of course, missing the opportunity to see, some of the positives that are happening this year. And this is from Titan Uranus, which is a poster on Demonland, who noted some interesting information that Daniel Hoyne had talked about on his SEN show on the 15th. There were a couple of other points that were referenced here, but I'll just focus on the first couple because the others weren't so positive. So in the spirit of remaining positive, I'll just highlight these 2 ones, which is where the third, this is coming into before the weekend. We were the 3rd fastest ball movement team in the competition, with the main reason being we get it and go quickly. We play on with short forward movements. We're one of the fastest teams at playing on in the AFL. And our ability to move the ball from one end of the ground to the other is this is again coming into the before the weekend, in which we improved in these stats significantly. Like, we had a great transition weekend. Our ability to move from one end of the ground to the other is 5th best in the competition. Obviously, the challenge has been scoring from those transitions for us. Only scoring 1 in 4 from those chains, when the average is AFL average is 1 in 2 when you bring it from the other end of the ground. But nonetheless, it just shows what Goody's been talking about in terms of our ball movement has actually been pretty good, and that's something that is well worth highlighting. And whilst it's easy, it's a funny dynamic when you criticise the Ds for getting it inside 50. The implied criticism is we don't score enough, but you can't score unless you get it inside 50. So, it seems a bit sort of counterintuitive to not at least acknowledge we've been getting the ball inside 50 both quickly. We just haven't been taking our chances, and we saw how the game changes when we do take our chances. Tactically, I thought it was a really fascinating game, and we'll probably unpack a little bit through the show. And we were, again, fantastic with our ball movement this week. So that those 2 data points were coming into the game. Willow ratings that people have heard me reference, it's a great site, willowratings.com. He's got a wealth of stats there, really easy to search, and he put some of the key stats on Demonland in a thread each week called Stats File 2025. And he noted that he's got some new transition stats that he's now keeping, which goes to the sort of just how significant transition is in footy and how key a data point it is. And sort of just picking up that theme from that we're moving the ball pretty well, is the transition stats show that Melbourne were able to transition the ball really well from our back half. 33% of our D50 chains and 40% of our defensive half chains. That means chaining it out, possessions out of our defence, resulted in inside 50. So that's really, really impressive. Definitely we could have capitalised even better than we did, and we could have really put them to the sword. But nonetheless, that was still a big improvement in our scoring. As you said, Andy, we were, I think, 74 points at halftime, weren't we? Which was our previous high score for the whole season after 4. So Willow's introduced some transition-based stats for if you're interested in looking at them. There was also, I watched the footy shows for the first time this season pretty much last night, and I thought this was interesting. What's the ex-Hawthorn player and Melbourne player, Lewis? noted that, again, this theme about what Goody's doing differently, different Ds in 2025, the Chiron said, under Goody, since the period, this is his 9th season since he's been coaching, speed of ballment, this is the fastest on record for moving the ball under Goody. And so that's interesting if you go back to 17 and 18, how fast we move the ball then. We were moving it faster than anyone in the AFL in 2017, 2018 from the back half. We're moving it faster now than we were then. Uncontested marks, we've had the most uncontested marks so far at any point under Goody, and long down the line kicks, which were the bane of so many fans, over the last few years in Goody's style. We've got the lowest number of long down the line kicks in Goody's tenure as a coach. So that's really interesting, I think, in terms of giving us an insight into what Goody's trying to do. And we saw the benefit of it on the weekend. It was exciting footy, wasn't it? That handball chain that ended up with a goal to Petty, marking near the top of the goal square, was just thrilling bit of footy with those handball. That's the other feature that Goody that probably will get picked up in the next little while, I'm guessing, on the footy shows or whatnot, is I talked last year at the beginning in the preseason last year in the practice games, we were clearly trying to do long handball forwards. We were clearly trying to implement that. We're still trying to implement that, and we saw the benefit of it. It's what Collingwood are doing. Our game plan is looking remarkably like Collingwood's at the moment, like incredibly similar. Before I get into the good, the bad, the ugly, and the curious, the player ratings, what a performance from Kozzy. He had, remember, 20 is considered an elite game, all-Australian level game of footy. Kozzy had a rating of 21.8 with his highest point scoring in that last quarter. I love that. So 21.8 is just, for a small forward, that is something out of the box. What a time for Jack Viney to have his best game of footy for a long time. He scored almost 20, and I'll have to do an analysis of this, but I suspect that's one of his highest scores for some time. He's not sort of generally a super high scoring under this player rating system. He had an awesome game, fantastic. He dropped away a little bit at the end, but 19.9 is fantastic. As you mentioned, Andy, Trent Rivers had a terrific game and exciting the way he played. I really like him playing from halfback flank. I think that's a better position for him than midfield. He was third, 16.8. How's this? The Bison, Harvey Langford, was our 4th rated player, including a goal, a match-winning goal in the last quarter. His match rating was 16 for the game. Just a note on him, he's not particularly quick, but geez, he's a quick thinker. That goal was a perfect example of it. His brain is sort of operates. He's got time with the ball in hand like all the best players do. But if you watch the replay of that goal he kicked, he was already set up for turning it around across his body before he even received that ball. It was and it looked slow in doing it, but his brain works super quick. He is going to be a gun, that kid. Jake Bowie continues his incredible season. He's been a real shining light for us this year. Bowser, he was our 5th best player, then track Pets. This one was interesting. And, there's a lot of people, Pearl probably being one of them, who criticise the player ratings. Player ratings is, it's just another point. It's not necessarily saying who's best, although it often does line up that way. Max Gawn was our 7th or 8th best player. He's 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th with 13.4 rating points. So that was really interesting. The rating points, they really take points off for missing goals, and he missed a couple of easy goals. So that was why his rating was so low in that last quarter, was only 0.5. But he got 9 coaches' votes, didn't he, Andy? Who else got the coaches' vote?
Kozzy and Max got 9. I think Bowie had T-Mac got 1, and Shy Bolton, I believe.
Yeah. And so Gawn was just awesome in that last quarter. Like, he was so influential on that result. And, I was yelling out, build a statue of the fella, because he's just a legend of the footy club. And he was enormous in that last 10, 15 minutes. So to the good, I said last week, I put it on the players. I criticised we lost the game last week. At the beginning, the fundamentals, our pressure was woeful and our contest was woeful. But it was certainly not the case this week. So our pressure was brilliant. A lot of questions will be asked of Freo this week with their pressure. The match pressure rating was 187 to 164, so plus 23. Unbelievable. That's fantastic. The most impressive stat, though, is our last quarter was our pressure rating was 195 in that last quarter, our highest of the season, of any quarter for the season, and the highest of this match, obviously, as well, to their only 163. So it's almost a complete inverse of the previous week against the Bombers. We're plus 32 when the whips are cracking in the last quarter, and plus 26 pressure points in the second. I just wanted to flag something about the pressure because that's aggregated over a period of time, and it's the same with the inside 50 and time in forward half stats. Is when it's aggregated over a period of time, like a quarter or a match. Say time in forward half is 50-50, but it's the time when you get to like a 10-minute burst where you're 70-30, and that's where you get the scoring done. So just on the pressure, it's exactly the same with the pressure. So at the 9-minute mark of the first quarter, our pressure rating was 223. At the 5-minute mark, 5-minute and 32-second minute of the last quarter, our forward pressure was just immense. We led the tackle count in the forward half. It's 8-1 at that point after only 5 minutes. We had a pressure factor of 247 by that stage of the last quarter. Just incredible. And at the and then later we averaged 184 across the first three quarters, and at one point in the fourth term we peaked at 321 in a short burst of time. So it just shows what our pressure in that last quarter was really top notch. And as I said, you're just not going to win games of footy without your pressure being at the elite level. Our top 5-6 rated players were Jack Viney, Clayton Oliver, who whilst he's a bit slow, Clayton, off the standing start and at full clip, he is been up in the top 3-4 pressure applied each week so far this year, and he's tackling really hard. Jake Bowie was third, Tom Sparrow track, which was really good because he had 35 pressure points, and Charlie Spargo had I thought a really good game, and he was our 6th highest rated player on pressure. He had 33 pressure points, 14 pressure acts, well above his season average at 23.5, but keeping in mind that he was a sub in at least one of the matches. So another good from scoring. I talked last week about our contest. Not scoring in contest was woeful. Last week we were -2 for the most important contest stat in footy, which is post-clearance contested possessions. -2 is just terrible. This week we were +15 against a very good contested team, 85 to 70. So that's a complete and utter 180-degree turnaround. Brilliant. And we're also +16 for post-clearance ground ball gets, which really shows what Goody was talking about. Like, this is the numbers that he were on the board at quarter time, that he was obviously emphasising to the players that this is what we want to do, and we'll talk a little bit about the tackle numbers that make that sort of stuff possible. So 16 for post-clearance ground ball get is terrific. Another positive was that we scored 58 points from turnover against a season average of our season average thus far is 34.5, and I think it was 30 coming into this match or something, or 29. So we almost doubled our season average coming into the match from points from turnover, which was just brilliant. +24 from scores from centre clearances was another positive, particularly just watching them stream out the front of the square. It must have been driving Freo fans nuts. Gawn grabbing it out of the ruck and handballing it forward to track. The goal from Viney was just an absolute joy to watch, and is really what we're trying to do. Scores from turnover in our defensive half, season average is 11. And in this game, we scored 38 points, meaning that turning the ball over in our defensive half, we're only averaging 11 points this season. As a score source, this time it was 38 points. Again, that's all about the pressure, the intensity. The turnovers happened because of how hard at it we were. And to be honest, that Freo weren't hard at it enough. Our tackling was a real positive. Last week we're actually pretty good with tackles inside 50. We were plus 10, 14-4, which was about the only good that I could find in last week's data. But we were phenomenal this week, and a lot was made of it in the call. 27, Longmire Muir was asked about it in the presser 27 tackles inside 50 to their only 4, plus 23 for that number is fantastic. That, that really goes a long way to explaining the victory, I think. But we also had 59 tackles, 59-46 plus 13. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I really felt this week we stuck a lot of our tackles. So, we weren't getting run through, and there were some really, really critical tackles, none more so than the one you pointed out, Andy, of Rivers running down. Who was it that he ran down?
Amos.
Amos. Yeah, that was like, geez, again, if you're a Freo fan, you just would have been furious with that. So on bad, some defensive issues. So obviously giving up 97 points is a lot. That weren't thrill goody. We struggled to prevent Freo scoring when they transitioned from their defensive half. 24% of their defensive half chains resulted in a score compared to the AFL average of 13%. 61 of their points came from their defensive half against our season average of conceding only 38 from the defensive half. So they really, they hurt us on the turnover. There's no doubt about that. And that's something that our defence will have to sort of work its way through. But I think this is well worth pointing out, a few things that I think, I thought our defensive effort was fantastic. Our all-team running was back to its best, or maybe not quite to its best, but it was good. And I thought that our defense in that last quarter was both the back seven, but also just generally was terrific. But watching the replay the second time, so the two things I thought was Bolton. Like, how skillful is that fella? He was brilliant. And live at the game, I don't watch the opposition, so I had no sort of real sense how impactful he was. But a lot of their scores from turnover, or at least 4 or 5 of them, were a direct result of his brilliance. Of course, we had 2 All-Australian defenders, our 2 best defenders out in May and Lever, which is going to make it hard. We had the brave decision. A goodie, really made some brave calls. He used a tagger when he doesn't normally use a tagger, and he put Petty up forward, which meant Turner had to play in defence. And I thought Turner did a great job, but we lost him at halftime. So, I think so we lost one of our key defenders at halftime. He didn't blink. He kept Petty up forward. So I thought that whilst some of those defensive numbers are a bit concerning, there are some caveats there that I think are well worth noting. Not least, of course, as I said, May and Lever and Turner all not being in that second half. That said, another not so good was we were minus 16 from scores from around the ground stoppages. And just the other point, actually, while I think about it, around their scoring 97 points, I think that it's something that we all have to accept. We can't have our cake and eat it too. If we want the club to move to a modern game and transition hard and ball movement, which is exactly what Goody's trying to do, as D-Star 9 has pointed out, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. You can't make a cake without breaking some eggs. We are going to give up scores on turnover and on the counter. It's unavoidable with this model. It's about, how well you can organise and watching. I've actually really been enjoying watching Collingwood this year, and I think we've really gone to work on their method. And defensively, they're really good. One of the things they're really good at is getting back hard, and that's something we're going to have to continue. And it's just a slight worry with May, for instance, is he's not the quickest player at getting back. So, I think that it was interesting him not playing. We looked a bit quicker up there. Ugly, there was really only one ugly that I could find, which was 55 points from turnover isn't great. But as I said, I think there's a few caveats on that. There was a curious one, which was Freo averaged 333 metres gained from handballs coming into this game, or for the season. They only got 33 metres from handballs coming into this match, which is crazy. And I'm not quite sure what the reason, but our intensity and pressure is clearly one of the factors. But they like to use forward handballs as well, as their average metres gained is higher than ours, I think, from handballs. So for us to be able to take that away from them, the other factor too that was really significant was uncontested marks. We had 110 marks, 104 uncontested marks, and we had 28 more. We had 48 more uncontested possessions than them, which is exactly what they're trying to do. We took that away from them, and that's what's happened to us in previous week. Teams have got us by beating us with uncontested possessions, and again, we took that away from them, and we dominated in that space. Again, big tick for Goody. He had a lot of really good wins in the coach's box this week. Good week in the stats file.
All right, I guess the question is, and we'll try to answer whether it's one-off or whether they can continue. Well, let's get into the listeners' questions. And anyone who listened to the podcast last week would have been subjected to a very passionate and expletive-laden but heartfelt rant from yours truly. We had many people comment in our podcast thread after the episode aired, and KLV said, Andy, your rant was very cathartic. Thanks for effectively expressing your sheer fury. It's mine too. Doug Reamer wrote, that's the best 2 minutes of raw passion I've heard. I wanted to pull on the boots and draw a beep line in the sand. Bobo said it escalated so quickly, I loved it. BW511 said, can we get Goody to play Andy's address to the playing group? That was a thing of beauty. Clintosaurus said, same language but totally different tone to the 2021 Grand Final potty. 2 best moments ever on this podcast. And my sister, shout out to Em on the other side of the world, said, dusting off the old Demonland password just to say that if you've ever sat next to Andy at the footy when Melbourne is losing, that colourful rant was nothing. Demon WA wrote, good quality rant there, Andy. Don't agree with it all, but love the passion. Dutch Demons wrote, wow, Andy getting sweary was not on my bingo card for 2025. And Spirit of Norm Smith said, whilst I agree with most of the views and disagree with other views expressed, I love the anger, love the discussion, love the passion. Andy got angry. Actually, he was quite tame compared with some conversations I've had with fellow Demon supporters in the last few days. And D. Old Fart wrote, love your unbridled and heartfelt passion for the team we love, and your anger with what has been dished up both on and off the field since the end of last season. I can only hope that somebody with authority at the club tunes in and takes note. Ghost Rider writes, I think I like Angry Andy. Yasarian said, logging back on for the first time in ages just to say I bloody love that angry rant from Andy. I was cracking up in the car. Sensational. Give us a glimmer of that passion from absolutely anywhere within the club. And Supreme Demon wrote, I liked Angry Andy. I'm also very passionate at the football, and I love it when I hear that passion in fellow Demon supporters too. Red and Blue Rising said, express perfectly how we're all feeling at the club. Please send it to them and put a rocket up them. Not acceptable from the board down. Bring Back Pal says, I stood up and clapped. And Maxie said, Andy's rant last week should not be underestimated in getting the D's up and about. Love the passion, fellas. Swooper Northy says, Andy, your well-timed spray last week's podcast, fire and brimstone that would have made Barras proud, clearly had the desired effect. Well done. And finally, Whispering Jack says, any result on the Demonland match review panel's deliberations on the report against Andy for his outburst on last week's podcast? Well, it's not often that I let my emotions spill over like that on the podcast. And while I will apologise for the language, I'm never going to apologise for the passion, because I bloody love this football club. Its fortunes, whether soaring or coming crumbling down, it's deeply embedded in my psyche. And this club isn't just something that I support. It's part of who I am. And of course, family comes first, but the Melbourne Footy Club's, very, very close second. And I've spent my entire life not just following the D's, but living and breathing them. The club's woven into the fabric of my identity. And in the nearly 50 years that I've had on this earth, I've seen more heartbreak than triumph. And, You guys can attest to this. As a kid, we were the easy beats, the perennial cellar dwellers, if you will. In my teens and early adulthood, we had the flickers of final success, but we were never truly feared. We were never a powerhouse. And then came over a decade of being a complete a basket case until finally there was this glorious light at the end of the tunnel, and we clawed our way to the summit. The flag in 2021, that was everything for all of us. We reached the promised land, but a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic meant that I and all of you guys, we all watched it alone on the couch, far from the people that we would have celebrated it with. But still, we as a club, we had arrived. We had a team, that had the potential to create a dynasty, a sustained era of greatness and success. And now, just a few short years later, we find ourselves 0-5. Well, now we're 1-5, teetering on the edge of yet another rebuild, maybe another stretch in the footballing wilderness. And it was devastating, and that's why the emotion sort of came out. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't calculated. I didn't plan on it. It was very raw. Just it's the club that means everything to me. So yeah, I'll apologise for the language, but I'm never going to apologise for the passion, because this club, it lives in my soul as it does in all of yours. Anyone who's listening to this now, 2.5 hours every week for talking about a 2-hour game, we've all got passion, and yep, that's all I have to say about that.
And isn't it good that 𝗪cie, the club's captain, posted there saying that you were responsible for the win?
Well, there we go. There you go. They did not invite me into the rooms before the game. All right, well, let's get into the proper questions. We did have a caller who called in. I did answer it, but they hung up. Maybe they didn't like my heartfelt little soliloquy there. Lazy writes, we smashed uncontested possession this week, 252 to 204. I think it set the tone from the start that we were willing to work. But why is it that when we've been beaten in this area this year, that we look so poor? What is it about kick marking against Melbourne that makes us easy to play against? I hope to see us at least break even in this stat for weeks to come. And Dice says, we finally won the tackle count. Effort, effort, effort. And it's amazing what message is sent to the rest of the group when big name players are dropped. Goes D's. Bucknaked says, 100-point turnaround since the last time. This was a game where the effort was going to tell the tale. Were they prepared to play for the coach and each other? We saw this with heaps of team-first actions. A nice day out, but how long will it last? Is this the enlightenment and renaissance or just a blip on the radar? Spirit Norm Smith says, pressure was elite, over 200 consistently, not that pathetic 135 from last week. The tackling better, more contested footy, 59 tackles, 27 in forward 50. The pressure was huge as we locked it in. A little reminder of us of 2021. Still too many missed tackles or where Freo got the handball away. Work to do, but a lot better. So, George, overwhelming consensus on Demonland after the game was that we finally brought the pressure and effort and attitude, all of which has been sorely lacking over the previous 5 weeks. And the big question now, can we sustain it? What was this, just a one-off or the start of something more? Got some very winnable games on the horizon. If we can build some consistency off the back of this performance, it's going to go a long way to rebuilding confidence. And with that, maybe we can start to challenge some of the stronger sides again.
We got exactly what we all wanted and needed this week. It was fantastic. I posted, I think, on Demonland that some of the Freo efforts, you could have replaced the Melbourne players from the previous week's efforts with some of their players. I was extraordinarily surprised at Freo's drop-off. This wasn't the Freo that we saw last year that, they beat us by, nearly 15 goals and then 10 goals. Mm. And some of Bin Man's stats were just damning for them, that while we had 27 forward 50 tackles, they had 4. One a quarter. That's just nowhere near AFL standard. That statistic that Bin Man quoted about forward handballs, 33 metres. That's just insufficient handballs in the first place from a team that everyone would have said would be at least challenging for the 8. So I'm very glad that we took full advantage of it. Even the way that we scored was far too easy at times. Which is great when you're a supporter of the side that's taking benefit of it. But we scored 13 goals out of the 16 from running into the forward 50 or kicking from outside the forward 50 or crumbing the ball in front of goal. That we were working so much harder than them, and they were allowing us to do it. It was just extraordinary watching, like I said, a team that supposedly is a challenger for finals, and the way they fronted up for the game. Max had a great game, but just as equally, 𝗟𝗏cy was awful. Absolutely awful. Four possessions for the whole game. 4. And one of those was a mark in the last quarter.
Yeah.
To allow Maxi to continually push him off and take it on the full out of the ruck at the centre square. I haven't seen that as often. Well, I don't think I've ever seen it as many times, a number one ruck versus a number one ruck sort of dominating him in the way he did.
Yeah, but he just did nothing around the ground as well. Normally you expect like I said, apart from that mark and goal in the last quarter, he just did nothing for the whole game. It was quite extraordinary what we were seeing. So, all kudos for us.
For a long time, I think, because he was injured, wasn't he? So,
but even so, for in any player to have 4 disposals in a game of football, is just not up to standard. So, we brought the pressure. We did exactly what we needed. We had the run that we needed. I'm hoping that we'll see similar sorts of things next week from our side. But I don't know that we're going to get sort of the free movement that Freo allowed us to get away with in this game. Really, when we had no Lever, no May, and we had Turner out by half time, effectively it was T-Mac and no one else in the back line, and we still held them out. So there was something seriously wrong with what was going on at Fremantle, but we'll take the win, and hey, it was great to watch.
Totally. And a couple of things on that, George. One thing is outside of there's Jackson and there was another player who'd be in their best 22. I can't think of at the moment, but that was almost the best team that they could put on the park outside the Jackson and the other player who I can't recall.
Was it Walters?
Maybe No, I don't think
Walters wasn't playing. Neither was Fife, if he's still considered best.
Five's finished.
I think it was either of them, to be honest. But anyway, it was pretty close to their best 22. Certainly closer than we were.
The guy who towed us up in the practice game. What's his name? Driscoll. He's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, Jackson's obviously the big one. So one, it was a pretty good team they had on the park. 2. But coming in, everyone was saying, I had to laugh because I watched the replay. And David King's first thing he said is that he thought they were going to, top 4, good chances, winning the flag, best list in the AFL was what David King opened his analysis with. And
I'm worrying about you, Bin Man. That's 2 weeks in a row you've been listening to David King.
Well, that was on the replay. It was last week was the painful post-match analysis. But he was saying how potent their forward line is. So it's worth noting, Amos and, everyone reckons Tracy's the second coming of Peter Hudson at the moment. So we did pretty well to maintain it. But there's a question later about fitness, so I won't cut my own lunch because I'm going to answer that one. But it's interesting.
We got a caller on the line. We'll take in a sec, so stay on, caller.
They noted a couple of times in the commentary that the fact that Port had Freo had come to Melbourne after the gather round and not gone back to Perth. And a couple of them were Jack Rigold, who's increasingly I'm finding just frustrating. But he talked about the risk of doing things like that can really throw your routines when everyone's players and teams are so routine based in their preparation that he wondered whether that could have an effect before the game or early on in the first quarter. So
it worked for us last year when we did the double Adelaide thing. So you can look at it both ways. We do have a caller on the line. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Hey guys, it's Rob from Maidstone again. How you going?
Good, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just wanted to call in on a more positive note than last time. Didn't want to be that guy always leaving bad reviews. Firstly, just wanted to point out how good the vibes were at the G. Like, I just love being at the G against an interstate side, and it's just a love fest. Like, it's so good. No better place to be, in my opinion, in the world. Like, especially when you got your family and friends there. Just loved that game. Live down near the cheer squad, it was awesome. Just like last time I called in, I sort of had a crack at Max for not, giving the fans a shout out, and I just want to sort of eat humble pie on that. Like, he gave us a pump up in his post match on the ground, and then Goody really gave us a massive shout out in his presser. Kate Chandler gave us a shout out on the field there as well. Like, I couldn't even hear what he was saying because the crowd was going off. But I just really appreciated that, and really just felt like it was all heart, in the crowd there. So yeah, that was awesome. I mainly wanted to call in and just make my point there, and just sort of make up for my last call. But I also wanted to ask you guys about Frida was dropped and Melksham kept his spot in the side. I know I think he came in for the Gold Coast game, so he hasn't had a great run at it, Melksham. But I really feel like Frida is the kind of player that would have gone off on the weekend, in that if we're playing like that, like, Frida would have kicked the bag probably as well, So I don't know. I just would like your thoughts on whether you'd prefer Frida in the side over Melksham or not.
Go ahead, big man. Yeah.
Well, personally, I've been calling for Frida to get dropped a couple of weeks. I think that the point, Goody made it clear what the benchmark was this week, that the team would be judged on intensity and pressure, and he simply hasn't been bringing enough, and JVR needs form. But so personally, I think that Frida needs to go back and work on his defensive efforts and bang the door down before he can come back. I agree. He would have loved it out there, the open space, but only if it's no coincidence that we went from, 14 tackles inside 50 to 27 tackles inside 50. Neither, if you look at the pressure numbers and tackle numbers for Frida and JVR, they've been, after a pretty good first round, they've been appalling since. So, I think that was really, the cause for, at least for Frida being dropped. I suspect that with JVR, it's a little bit more about his form. But I think Frida should have been dropped 2 weeks ago, so I was very pleased. And I thought Melksham, whilst he wasn't huge, he competed hard, and he's an on-field leader. And I've really been thinking about this a lot, actually, is that I really think we've missed Gus and Nibbler's on-field leadership, and both are glue-type people. And I reckon Melksham's a bit like that as well. And but I've got a question for you, Rob. You're at the game. Wasn't the crowd? There was 25,000 people there, which I thought was a fantastic turn up. And again, Andy's pointed this out, the cameras would have made it feel like, but where we were on the Olympic side, it felt crowded and it was super loud. Did you find the crowd really engaged and loud?
I did. Rob?
100%. I don't know if it was just because I haven't seen a win at the G
in 245 days.
But also against a smaller interstate side for a while. So it was just all us. So I don't know. It definitely felt louder than normal, and I thought it sounded louder when I watched the replay on telly. I definitely felt louder. And same as you, just walking around the Olympic side, it just felt buzzing. Obviously we're winning, so that helps a lot. But
I swear I feel like it's a factor. It was a factor in the win. So sorry, George, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's no way that Frida will be back this week based on his performance at 𝗚cie, and we'll talk about that later on. But also, Frida would not have got many goals this week as well. We only had 3 goals scored from kicking the ball into a marking player inside 50. Most of the goals came from the crumbing forwards and from people running the ball into the 50-metre mark. So that's not Frida's game by any stretch of the imagination. So there was no need for Frida, and he wouldn't have done all that well this week.
just backing that
I
up.
mean,
I just checked them. We only had 7 marks inside 50. They had 12.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and one of the other tactical things that was really fascinating was the way they played Kozzy, is that they pushed all the half forwards and pockets really high. And so particularly in that second half, he was given so much space inside the arc to move. So, again, Fritter has to, if he's going to get back into that side, he's got to play high half forward and tackle hard and be the person kicking it inside 50, not the person marking it inside 50, I reckon.
Rob, you were started to say something?
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate all those points. I think, I suppose I was just comparing Fritter and Melksham.
Yeah.
I suppose if you look at the numbers, he hasn't done much more, but yeah, he hasn't also had a good run at it like Fritter has this year. I think, it'll be the leadership call is a big one too with Melksham. I think he's definitely highly valued by Goody, like we've seen in the past. He's held this spot for, I assume, leadership reasons. Yeah, thanks a lot for taking my call again, guys.
Not a problem, Rob. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Good on
Thank
you,
you,
Rob.
and we'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, go D's.
Go D's.
Go Red Layers.
Well, we're not quite finished yet because Phil C writes, we look so dynamic today, full of run and dash off half back and playing on from a mark often. How can we look so utterly different from previous weeks? Is it confidence or the team starting to gel? Is this our actual game plan? Monocular says, watched on KO, but it felt like there were far more low kicks into 50 and fewer bombs. We also locked it in better. Is this a deliberate game plan shift or just how it played out? Can we keep it up? Spirit of Norm Smith says, it was a more dynamic style today, not perfect, but better. More run and dash off half-back and playing on from a mark often. No boring sideways, useless kicks. Guess what? It works. Play on and overlap running and kicking puts defenders under pressure. Simple stuff. Don't wait for the defence to zone and flood back. Simple footy. Travi14 says the new game plan relies on speed and skill, and that's why the selection of Colt, Spargo and Howes are not to be overlooked. In the future, I expect Laurie and, of course, McPhee to also come in, which means less disposals but better skill. We are going to get scored against easier with this game plan, but is this the way forward? So, big man, is this the game plan you've been expecting to see from the Demons? And now that we've had a glimpse of it for longer patches than just here or there, what are your thoughts on it and how it's shaping up?
No, this is absolutely the game plan that Goody's trying to implement. He said as much afterwards. I think George's point about Freo's low pressure is a really important one. When you get those sort of differentials, is what we did really good in this game that we haven't been doing is pressing up. That's what I called for us last week, to get in the grill of the opposition. They didn't do that to us. And as George said, they let us move it too quickly for whatever reason. Their pressure wasn't an elite level. I thought we, on the other hand, were brilliant, is that we were gut running to get across to marks to make sure they couldn't play on. We were up in their grill. We weren't allowing them to chip mark. We obviously went in there with a goal, with a plan to put pressure on them. 100%, this is what we're trying to do. I think, really, to be honest, that's sort of what I was touching on last week, a little bit about the messaging, is this is the game plan that we're going to run with, but by this, we're going to have some losses this year. So, we're going to struggle to make the 8 now with a start. But even so, I think it's important. Like, that's where I'd like the club to be reframing things, is that we are really emphasising this is a new game plan. They're trying to, or I think, the second year of trying to implement a new game plan. And so we're going to have some times when we're going to get opened up, particularly if we ever let our pressure drop off. It's just absolutely critical that our pressure remains critical. In terms of Phil C's comment about the Monocular's comment about more low kicks into 50 and fewer bombs, locked it in better. Is that a deliberate game plan shift or how it played out? Can we keep it up? I think we'll have some up and down. A lot will depend on our fitness. It's a hugely taxing game. I think one of the things that is underlooked is how many players were leading up at the ball carrier. Like, that was really noticeable. So bomb it in when no one's running at you. And that was something JVR has got to get out. I'll be really interested to hear. I didn't watch any of the Kozzy games, so I'll be really interested to hear what George's comments later are about how JVR played. But he has got to lead up at the footy. And we were leading up at the footy all over the ground, not just inside 50. So that was vastly improved. I thought there was some, definitely more dynamic. There was definitely more run and dash. We're going to have times when if teams put pressure on us, those handball chains will break down and we'll turn the ball over. Then we've got to be able to defend that turnover. That's going to be our challenge is, I think, our defending our turnover. Absolutely spot on. Speed's critical. 𝗦𝗶𝘀𝗀 is huge to get back into that team. It will give them some technical flexibility of how they play Windsor. They'll be able to put him onto the wing if need be. We really have missed 𝗦𝗶𝘀𝗀. He's also got wheels. Howes has got wheels. Speed, ability to get back on turnover for our defenders is going to be critical. I think that it's interesting, though, that comment about, spirit of Norm Smith saying it's more dynamic, no boring sideways, useless kick. Guess what? More run and dash off the half-back flank. That's one of the reasons I personally really like statistics, is because sort of just on the top of my mind, I might have agreed with that until I'd read the data to say we're actually the fifth best team in the AFL coming into this match, before this match, at moving the ball from the back half. And you can't do that unless you're playing on. We're playing on quicker than at any time in Simon Goodwin's coaching career. So we were doing those things. We saw the benefit of it when it worked, and we're going to go backwards. It's, that whole, there's all that research around curves, or when you're implementing new, you get a drop off before you you always go down below the sort of line before you go up, and it's consistently in place. The thing about it is when it's so instinctive, though, they instinctively know where each other are. For me, I personally think our biggest challenge, like as I said last week, there's a lot of focus on the forward line, but I think that it's defensively, getting that defensive system right must be a massive, massive challenge, because it's so structured-based and so system-based. So huge positives. And this week will be a really interesting test, because as George says, Richmond play a very high. They want to put pressure on us. They'll want to be intense. But yeah, this is what the game plan is going to look like. And as I said, how exciting was it? I mean, how exciting was it? Some of the goals were thrilling. One thing I will say just finally about scoring is how critical accuracy is. We were, 5-1 after the first quarter? I think we were 8-1, 8-2 at one stage.
Yeah, it was 6-1 and then 6-1 again.
6-1. So heaps of times this season, we just haven't put it's all swings and, momentum. You've got to put the score on the board, and we're able to do that. If we'd kicked 4 points and only one goal or something, the whole game changes, doesn't it? So it's critical that we're able to do it. One of the factors of the way we moved it is how many goals, Longmuir pointed this out, how many goals we scored from the goal square. It was quite phenomenal. It certainly helps your accuracy when you're kicking from 15 metres out. So,
yeah. Just a couple of things. I'd encourage people, if they can, to go back to last week's AFL 360, where they had Simpson and Longmire talking about movement of the ball into the inside 50 area. Basically, trying to get it to the hot spot and how you got it in there. But a bit of a précis of it. If you kick it to the 30 and 40 metre mark, all you're doing is kicking it straight to the opposition. You've got to get it that perfectly placed at the top of the square sort of kick. So go and have a look at that, and they do a bit of analysis of actually some of the Melbourne players the previous week as well, so that was interesting. But just another insight, and I'll encourage Binman to keep an eye on it for this week. For the first time I saw a transition from zone to man that was executed in this game. It was in the third quarter. Fremantle were bringing the ball out of their defensive half, and they couldn't move the ball at all because every single Melbourne player had moved onto an opponent. I have never seen that before. People usually guarding space or 3 to 5 metres away from someone. The whole team, I was just probably in the right position to see it, moved straight alongside their man, and I think it was Draper was trying to bring the ball out, and he could not kick it to anybody.
The third down, he was trying to bring it down the Shane Warne side.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny you should say that because, well, that goes to the point about our ability to take away their uncontested marks. And so that's a really interesting observation. Maybe that was part of the strategy because it really, I remember that bit of play, George, because they looked flummoxed, didn't it?
Yeah, and they had nowhere to go, yeah.
And it occurred to me how few times this season that used to be the default thing for players a couple of years ago. It was looking flummoxed about how you were going to move it when there's Max Gawn up the line or whatever and forcing him to do that. But, yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I wish that on the telly they'd show some of that, like to show the positioning.
Oh, you can always ask David King to pick it up.
Yeah, it's like because they did struggle to move it, didn't they? And they weren't. And going down the line wasn't a good option for them because, as you said, 𝗟𝗓cy was woefully out of form. So that's interesting. Whether maybe that's something that they've been working on. I think it must be a real challenge, that sort of fast ball movement. To defend. To have zones even. So I will watch that. I'll keep an eye out for that for sure. Just Andy on 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝗀𝗁 point. Absolutely. Colt was awesome. I loved Colt. Like he wasn't the most, his player rating was middling, but his energy was awesome. He was getting stuck into the opposition players. So was Windsor. And what he was doing was leading up hard, even if he wasn't getting rewarded. Did a lot of unrewarded running, took a couple of nice marks on the lead, some nice kicking. Sparrow the same. I thought, 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗁, as I said before, had a terrific game. I thought 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗁 was pretty good too, but his wheels are important. Interesting, Travis says expect Laurie to come back in. I know he had a good game statistically. McVie will be back in. Maybe Laurie's kicking skill is definitely what we need. And so there were some really positive sides from that respect. It makes such a big difference. And of course, Goody said it himself, like Kozzy is just such a dynamic footballer. It's just something else to watch. We missed him so badly in those first 3 weeks.
Speaking about Goody, the Ox says, we all lost our collective faith, heads, etc., but fortunately those inside the football club didn't lose theirs. The one person I felt more for with this win was Goody. He has copped it a fair bit and square. He's copped it fair and square from every direction, myself included. Surely we can see that he still knows what he's doing, and just give him some support. Keep up the good work, boys. We love you all. George, there's no doubt Simon Goodwin has been under the pump over the first 5 weeks from this podcast, from Demonland at large, from the media, social media. He's copped it from all directions, and now it's only one win, and we'll need to see whether he and the team can build on that performance. If we bring the same pressure, the same run, make the same tough selection calls and continue executing the game plan, maybe that we'll see the fruits of that. So, George, has this win shown you enough to restore your faith in Goody's leadership? And do you think this is something he and the team can build on and actually sustain?
I'm still in the same boat as Bin Man, that the coach isn't the top reason why clubs aren't perform, or a team isn't performing. First and foremost is the players. And while you've got to motivate the players, you've got to have the players with sufficient skills and willingness to do the work. And goodness gracious, all of a sudden we do the work and you get a completely different performance out of the side. So the coach can only do so much. I don't think Goody's a great tactical coach, but he's a motivational coach, and because he's a boundary line man effectively. But we've had questions about his support and the selection of certain players over the last 6 weeks now. We've seen some changes in that, so that's what we've been calling for. So it's pretty hard, but unfortunately the coach is the easiest person to get rid of out of the side, and if the side continues not to perform as well as what they should be capable of, then it's always the coach who gets the chop rather than the players.
All right, thank you for that. Let's get on to the next one. Demon Jinx writes, we have come off 5 weeks of looking tired, showing low pressure and not running out games, to suddenly play high pressure and running on top of the ground. Max said at the end of the game they thought they were one of the fittest sides going around. Is there any chance we looked at Brisbane losing their first 4 games last year before going on to win the flag and have decided that that's the approach, and so have loaded in the first month of the season to give them a fitness edge into the business end of the season? Seems a ballsy strategy that might have merits. Apologies for using the L word, but what else can explain this crazy turnaround in form? So, big man, we did look fitter this week. We certainly ran the game out better than any of the previous 5 weeks. And now I know in the past you've spoken about a lot about training loads and fitness. And while I've never fully wrapped my head around it, I've always respected the way that you frame it, not as an excuse, but as a possible explanation. And there are definitely people out there looking for reasons behind our slow start to the season and the perception of poor fitness, and some are drawing parallels to Brisbane's 2024 season, the poor start and the strong finish. So I guess the question is, do you think that's what's happening here? Is there merit to the idea they were deliberately loaded early with a view to peaking later in the season?
Yeah, absolutely there is. Remember when we spoke to... So the short answer is yes. I'm not sure so much about loading, but more about planning. Do you remember when we spoke to 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝘁𝗃 a couple of seasons ago? We interviewed him. Yep. That was in March, so I think it was either the first week or just the week before the first round. When we interviewed him, he talked about the planning that goes into a full season, and they start planning like for the next season at the end of the previous season. They have the full season mapped out in terms of how much loads they're going to get in at any given point. It's planned to within, incredibly complex sort of planning process, where they're going to peak at what time, all with the goal of peaking come grand final time. And so, I think that's logical to suggest that they would have been thinking about, how to best optimize fitness come final times, but also during the season. It's like different points to peak. And there's no doubt if you're going to pick a period to peak, well, when would you pick it? To beat Freo, who we owe big time, and then to have one of our biggest games of the year in terms of coverage and television and outside interest, the Richmond game. So it makes perfect sense that we might have planned that way to be peaking now, in which would mean that we're taking a calculated risk that we're not at our best in the first few rounds fitness-wise. But then that planning would have been done, with the goal of having a pretty good injury list. But subsequent to that planning, we lost Colt, we lost McVie, we lost May, we've lost Lever, we've lost multiple players.
We've had a lot of in-game injuries.
We've had a lot of in-game injuries, all of which would, all teams have those sorts of things. But if you look at the teams that are running on top of the ground right now, the fittest teams are the ones with the lowest injuries. So the short answer is yes. I think there's every chance that that's the case, and that we're planning to peak a bit later. I did a bit of analysis on the back of that question to test my, I've talked about my betting, and one of them is total match points, but also margins. So margins between the time is where you line bet, like, the line might be 12 points, for instance, or whatever. And just I tested what my anecdotal vibe was, because I track the scoring so closely because of my betting, is it felt like this year there's been way more variable, way more bigger winning margins. And so I looked at 2 bits data points. One, for the last 10 years, the first 6 rounds compared to the first 6 rounds of the last 10 years, and it's 4.58 more points, the winning margin, which doesn't sound much, but statistically that's a lot. It's 34.58 or something to 30 over the first 6 rounds. But if you extrapolate it over a full season, the first 6 games of this season, the average winning margin compared to the last 10 seasons over a full season, it's a goal higher average winning margin. And that's really statistically pretty significant. And what that tells me is, and there's also been more blowouts over 50 points. I forget the number. It's something like, there's been 6 already or 7 games already over 50-point losses, maybe more. And that's like the most for about 6 or 7 years or some such. And I think fitness is a factor in that. That's because the transition game is so taxing, is that, I think George's point about Freo's preparation for this game is that they looked a little flat, didn't they, George? And I think that if you have teams who look a bit flat, maybe Freo are planning for it to peak at a different time, maybe they've got a game in mind coming up, and you have a team like Melbourne who maybe had targeted this game and planned for months around peaking at this particular point in time, you get the mismatch that you can see. And some of the blowouts on the weekend, every week there's big blowouts. And I think, they're definitely condition and is part of it. So, yeah, I think that's definitely, it's not an excuse for our performance early on. And, of course, they're all, they're intertwined. It was really, really, really fascinating, though. 𝗟𝗄𝗃 said, that comment references it. 𝗟𝗄𝗃 said after the game that he said to the team that we were not going to lose this game. We were not going to lose that game. And then all of the data that I was pointing at before, 193 in that last quarter, again, that's our highest pressure rating for any quarter this season. So that tells me they were in peak condition for this match. Whether we can maintain that, we'll see. But yeah, I think it's definitely a chance that that's the case.
All right, Sam6172 writes, I'm sure this will get asked repeatedly over the next week. Do we keep tinkering with the forward line or leave it for a week? Only saw patches of the VFL and it seemed more of the same from JVR and Fritsch. Definitely didn't light the world on fire, but in saying that, GWS were also very good. Rooster Fast says, that game style we bought on the weekend is a boon for a player like Fritsch. Quick ball movement to an open forward half. Do we bring him straight back in, even though he was underwhelming at Casey? Where to for Petty, 4 goals and a gift to Kozzy in the square is exactly what we have needed. It'd be a brave man to move him back this week. So, George, I've got to be honest, I was pretty nervous when we dropped both Fritsch and Roo, and I understand the reasons behind their omissions. But in Fritta's case, I thought it probably should have happened a few weeks earlier, as Big Man said before. Coming into this game, we brought in an untried Fullerton, despite many people calling for players to be rewarded for their form at Casey. Turner, who's been pretty vanilla up forward this season, he gets a recall. And then you add in the chaos that we've had down back. May was a laid out, Lever's already sidelined, McVee's absent all season, so the defence has been in disarray. And then, we've got Petty going forward after last year's failed experiment, Turner getting swung back, and then he goes down at halftime with concussion. Howe's looking a bit shaky in defence sometimes. Overall, it just feels like we had a team lacking continuity, injuries, the in-game injuries I mentioned, poor form, questionable selections, players being shuffled forward and back, no real stability. So on paper, it looks like a recipe for disaster, but somehow it worked this week. It wasn't just a fluke. Is it something that genuinely clicked despite all the instability? And looking ahead, do we keep tinkering? And we'll touch on the Casey game and possible changes a bit later, but did either Fritter or JVR actually do anything to earn a recall? Or even if they didn't, have they served their time and one or both come back in regardless this week?
A fair bit to unpack there, Andy.
Yes. We're just a fault. We keep tinkering.
The good thing from this week was we got 9 goals out of Petty and Kozzy, which I don't know that we can expect every week. It'd be nice. Well,
that's what we thought. That's what we thought. When Petty had that, kick 6 goals or whatever, we thought, oh well, here we go. And then there we didn't.
How's that kick though? He's outside 50. He flushed that kick. Right in line with that beautiful kick. Love it.
Yeah. I think what really, I don't know that we've got many other options at the moment, and this was, everything fell our way for whatever reason this week, and Kozzy was at his absolute supreme, around the goals, coming into the 50, running into the 50 and showing the opponent the ball as he goes through the goal square. It's all great to watch.
I didn't like that, I must say, but
I loved it.
I loved it too. Come on, Andy.
No, I love the goal. No, I love the goal, but I don't.
Just kick it.
You can no. The showing the ball. That can bite you in the bum. It didn't.
Show the ball. We gave the peace symbol.
Don't go the finger. Whatever. No, that's. I mean that. It's the same thing. You're waving whatever you're doing. I don't like it because it can bite you in the bum. It didn't.
Well, he also the audio was great. He went beep beep.
Yeah. But I think going back to what I said before, go and have a look at this AFL 360 from last week. It tells you what the coaches, from Longmire and Simpson want to see the way the ball goes into the forward line. That's to hit the hot spot in the best possible way. And in this particular game, that's where most of our goals came from. and I expect that's what you're going to see. Unfortunately for the fans, you're not going to see the marks inside the forward 50 that they love to see the big forwards from the past taking. It just doesn't happen that often, and that's why the Simpsons and the Longmires want to get it into that area. It's about percentages. You're going to kick more goals from the crumbing forwards effectively, and the contests inside that hotspot area than what you are from any other point in the ground. So it all clicked for us beautifully this week. I just hope it works again this week. I think we have a great opportunity, actually, given the with Richmond's situation at the moment, to see it again. So here's hoping that it happens. But we're not until JVR comes back. I don't know that Fritsch is even remotely close to coming back. And I suspect JVR actually has an injury that he's carrying. Remember, he got back spasms that kept him out for that was the first game or the second game. He's just not moving freely, and it certainly isn't jumping. He'd be crashing packs and jumping over the top of players' heads, but he's not the JVR that we've seen in the past. So our options down there aren't great. Petty did a great job of filling in, and let's hope he can do the same again this week.
And George, just JVR will be back. Like, the progress is never linear for any players, let alone the sort of key position players. So, but in the chat room, there was a question earlier from 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 to say thoughts on Fullerton's game from what we saw live. It got a good rap from Goody. Did he lead up and double back all day? Hard to tell on TV. What were your thoughts about Fullerton's game, particularly in reference to, I guess, to where he fits into that forward line structure?
He did what he needed to. Not many possessions, didn't have a great deal of time on the ground. He was lucky in the rucking role that he had, that he was coming up against Oscar McDonald. I hope we don't try the same trick next week against Samson Ryan, because he's about 20 centimetres taller. But he did what he needed to do. He just lacks he's not physically strong.
He's not. But it was good to see, even though JVR wasn't in the team, it was good to see someone other than JVR rucking. And I thought he did it. I think that's a good point from 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝘁𝗁 in the chat room, that he led up. He provided the option. He set up one of our goals with a kick inside 50 from a mark outside on the half-forward flank. Pity he didn't go back and kick that goal. He's got a pretty awkward kicking action, doesn't he? But he had that free kick that came from really fast ball movement through the corridor. It would have been great if he nailed that. Yeah, I thought he did what he had to do. He's not really a Goody player, is he? Because Goody loves competitive beasts, and he doesn't strike me as that. But, he deserves to keep his spot, that's for sure. So
I think we've got a bigger question around the number of smalls that we can afford to have in the forward line. There was a ridiculous situation where we had Spargo against Draper this week. Spargo at 170 something or the other, and Draper at 197. And the ball came in. There was no question where it was going. I don't know that we can do that sort of thing too often. We just had one small too many this week.
Andy, just before you go to the next question to George, just in terms of that question around fitness, the other thing I'd just say, a couple of things, is one is that there's also a mental component to it, isn't it? Like, if you're not switched on, when you see it, like, you can tell 10 minutes in, and Freo didn't look like they were switched on early, even though they got the first goal, and they didn't look, that's surely part of that's mental. It's not just, ability to run well. There's obviously a factor there. And also just the other thing around fitness, as I've mentioned before, the best thing that I've seen in terms of getting a real sense how fitness actually manifests is the Telstra tracker data you can look at on the AFL app. I'm not really sure how well it is on PC, but on the telephone app on your mobile, it's really good. And when we're playing our best footy, we dominate in these stats. And just quickly, distance covered, we had 4 of the top 5. in terms of speed, we had 4 of the top 5 maximum, but average we had 3 of the top 5. Total sprints, this was the one that I found really interesting. All the top 5 players for total sprints on the ground were the D's: Pickett, Chandler, Pickett, Sparrow, Harvey, Langford, and Langdon. And then repeat, even more impressive, because it's all about repeat sprints is really the most important of the sprints, is that we had the top 4. Brayshaw was the only player of theirs in the top 5. Pickett and Langford both had 5 repeat sprints, which was great for the young fella. This is a big one. Average speed and attack, the top 5 are all Demons players. Average speed and defence, top 2 were Demon players, Colt being one of them, 3 of the top 5. This is a remarkable number. We ran 8 more kilometres than them, which is a lot in a game of footy, 289 to 281. At high speed, we ran 42 kilometres, so they're 38. Sprinting, we had 26 more sprints than them in total, and 14 more repeat sprints, almost twice as many, 29 to 15 repeat sprints, which is damning on Freo and picks up George's point before. But they're the sorts of numbers that really, when we were playing our best footy in 21, we were smashing those stats. So it's great to see that we were on the weekend again.
Oops, mute again. All right, this one's also for George. Rollo too writes, I'm curious if this game will prompt George to reconsider his take that tagging is outdated and has no place in the modern game. It seems to me that nearly every time we or any team uses this tactic, it seems to be an incredibly effective tool for shutting down a key cog in the opposition's game plan. Yes, you use a link-up player in some situations, but what you take away from the opposition is often far, far more important than what you yourself are giving up. So perhaps what is really outdated is thinking that tagging is outdated. George, we saw Jack Viney do a fantastic job shutting down 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝗀 on the weekend. Probably his best game of the season in the process. So it begs the question, is tagging still a valuable weapon in the toolkit of a modern AFL side?
No.
Next question.
If Viney tagged Sarong and caused him to drop off, then Sarong would have had about 40 possessions otherwise, but he still had 27, which was more than any of the Melbourne midfielders apart from Max. Tagging is... The concepts are okay, but it doesn't actually work out in practice. If you tag Sarong, you've let Brayshaw off the leash, and that's exactly what happened as far as the midfielders were concerned. The other thing is that in the past, there was usually one decent player in every side in the middle who was easy to tag. You tagged Robert Harvey at St Kilda as an example, but most teams have got probably 3 very, very good players in the middle. You can't afford to not have a decent player in the middle these days. So if you put a subpar player in the middle, then you're going to drop off your chances of being superior around the ball in particular. So it's a really difficult thing. The 3 main people, or the people who are working around the ball, don't allow tags to happen as a general rule because they simply take out the tagger and open up the space for them. You've seen, and you would have seen if you watched any of the Collingwood games, the opposition teams are constantly trying to tag out 𝗍𝗀𝗁, and all that happens is that whoever's trying to do it gets cleaned up pretty quickly. You just waste your time. The idea is to get the ball and use it to your best advantage, not to try and shut someone down. There's very few players can run with a really decent player like 𝗍𝗀𝗁. You can put someone on him, but he'll just leave you for dead sooner or later in the game. You have to work as a team, so you don't tag an individual. You have to work as a team to limit their effectiveness.
It's interesting, Joe. I mean, it depends a little bit on the definition, because I actually think in this example, it was a brilliant bit of coaching by Goody, and it was wildly successful. And Goody said it himself before. He flagged this, so he was playing psychological games before, and he was interviewed on the ground just before the start of the game. I subsequently, when I watched the replay, and he said that they were going to send 𝗍𝗀𝗀 to 𝗍𝗏. So they clearly had a plan. But they also said, I think whether it was either before after the game, perhaps Goody said this, is that 𝗍𝗀𝗀 is a player who plays best when he's got a task. He's got a clear sort of set goal. So it worked on both levels. However, what I would say is I'd have to watch it again with a bit more. Again, it's really hard on television, and I wasn't watching it for that thing on live, is did he really tag him? Or was it more of did he do a defensive job on him and worked hard and referenced, him at setups? And the reason I ask that is looking at his numbers, Jack 𝗍𝗀𝗀's numbers, it's his highest ranking score that I can remember for a while. So he's 19.9 player ratings. His predicted rating coming in based on the sort of analysis of his last handful of games. I forget how Wheeler arrives at that. His predicted rating was 9.6. He had 25 possessions. So, taggers don't get 25 possessions. I'm not even sure how many. I can't see how many 𝗍𝗏 got.
27.
27. So he almost got as many disposals as the guy he was so-called quote-unquote tagging. He had 7 inside 50s, 10 contested possessions, 4 post-clearance contested possessions, 14 handballs received, 5 clearances. That reads more like a player who the opposition needs to tag than a player who's tagging. So, I wonder whether actually how hard, how it wasn't an old school tag, was it? Old school tag, like the time you're talking about is, they'd get, they limit a gun player to 20 possessions and get 6 or 7 themselves and bob up with a goal and they'd be thrilled. I mean, he was statistically about the second, almost arguably the best player on the ground, Jack 𝗍𝗀𝗀. So if that's what he does when he's tagging and he got 76% disposal efficiency, they should tag him every bloody week. He had 7 inside 50s as well as he had as well. That's as good as he's played for a long time. And so, I would like to see Goody send him to a player each week with a goal to shut that player down, but still be hard running off the, so just not a hard tag. So I just don't know that the word tag, maybe it's a semantics thing, but it certainly wasn't a hard tag.
I think it's something that people think, they're referencing from 20 years ago.
Yeah, they hear tag on the thing.
Yeah. You try to limit the opposition players' effectiveness, but if you do that by playing a great game yourself, then you've actually done what you were meant to. But I didn't detect any tagging at all.
Well, he was definitely playing tight on him because he was setting up with him at every clearance. When they're both on the ground, he was setting up with him, and that's really not allowing 𝗍𝗏 to get that first touch or the second one. And just on that, like on that predicted rating, 𝗍𝗏's predicted rating coming into the game was 16.3, and he had 13.2. So it's still a pretty solid game of footy by 𝗍𝗏. But he, definitely it worked in terms of blunting 𝗍𝗏's impact on the game, and he has been their most impactful player this year. He's a gun, and he is critical to the way they clear the footy. So I suspect the real tag was at those clearances, and then not a hard tag after that. But perhaps tag's the wrong word. I think it's sort of responsible for him better.
All right, we've got some discussion on some individual performance. We'll fly through some of the comments on these individual performances, and I'll just get some quick commentary from one of you, one from each. We'll start about Ed Langdon. So Alex, no fancy name, asked, can we have talk about Ed Langdon? I feel when he came to the club, we saw him as a bit player with the running capacity he's one would. This year, I feel like he's one of the few who've provided a consistent contribution, and we're seeing him evolved into a leadership role that was probably not expected. Go Lordy responds, I have to disagree. Ed Langdon has never been a bit player. From his time as the other member of Gus Brayshaw's Wingers Club, Ed has been a major contributor at both ends and crucially in transition. On the weekend, he fired us up with important assists after Freo scored first. He has always been worth his weight in goal. in gold. So big man Langdon, far more than a big player. We target him for that very specific reason, that being we didn't have any genuine wingers. His two-way running and transition were a hallmark of our premiership season and beyond. He's been one of the only consistent shining lights among our more senior players this year, and he continued that on the weekend.
He did, and I was really surprised to see he had 6 score involvements. He actually had one of his quieter games. So he's it wasn't his best game this season, but it was definitely another solid game. And my point before, I was thinking, with Gus and Nibbler and that need for on-field leadership, he is a real on-field leader, and he's really I think he's respected across the footy world, and he's clearly got respect of his teammates. He's one of the few, I was about to say one of the few players, but he's certainly a player that I would love to sit down with and have dinner and have a good conversation with. But he's a switched on bloke, and be still my beating heart that lead up kick that he drilled into Petty for that was just magnificent for a player whose kicking is iffy at best at times. It was just an absolutely terrific bit of. A terrific kick, but also that play. If you go back, there's that goal. There's 2 goals that I think are really instructive for the way we want to play and how we're playing a little bit differently. And Oliver was involved in one of them. One was that one that ended up with Oliver set that goal up by smashing through someone on the half-forward flank and not kicking it long into the forward line, instead going lateral, and then it ended up in with Langdon in the corridor. And then another one, I might be confusing the two, and the other one was where Pickett, I think it was Pickett, kicked long for the goal for a cross for Rivers to mark over the top of the Freo player and play on immediately and kick that goal. Both of them were were the anti-kick sort of dump kicks into the forward line that were mindless. So, but yeah, that kick from Langers was just a thing of beauty.
Christian Salem, Mandy Lorian asks, what has happened to Christian Salem's silky skills and his decision-making? He turned the ball over on multiple occasions under no pressure and just seems to be bereft of confidence. And Spirit of Norm Smith agrees, saying, yes, I'm nervous with Salem now, unless it's a 15-metre kick sideways. He seems too cautious to hit a target 30 metres away. Lost his penetration, and when pressed, just kicks a high up and under. His style is to lean back when you should kick through the footy. So, George, do you have any reservations about Salem's disposal and decision-making at the moment?
Occasionally, yes. I think this is just simply an age-related factor coming into play. He's not as good as he used to be. His penetration with his kick is certainly not what it used to be. Like back in 2021, where he was just lethal with the kicking. He's not running as much as he used to as well. Again, I suspect it's age-related. But the other thing I think we're really not seeing from Salo is his ability to have that vision in contest to know where to hit the ball or just touch it enough and basically come out the other side. We're just not seeing any of that at all these days, but it's only 6 games into the season. I don't think he was done any favours last year with his thyroid problems that kept him out for a long period of time. He's not going anywhere because he's simply that level above a lot of the other players who are pushing for similar sorts of roles. So his best, I fear, is behind him, but his best is what he's got today is still pretty damn good.
All right. What have we got here? Tom McDonald, Jano2 says, I just want to give a shout out to our club's very own Benjamin Button, Tom McDonald. He's consistent, reliable, and always gives 100%. He looks incredibly fit and in great shape. Can he go around again next season? I guess time will tell, but I am enjoying his contribution to the team again this season. The big man, T-Mac, deserves a lot of kudos for being the general down back of a significant smaller back line. No May, no Lever, Petty forward, Disco injured before halftime. It's very impressive. He sort of held the fort down very well.
And look, I'm happy to say that my predictions of how well he would go at the beginning of the season have proved correct, Andy. I love him, and he looks in good nick. Salo looks in pretty good nick too, and I take George's point. He actually looks in reasonable nick, but Tom McDonald, because I look at that tracker data, people say he's slow. He's actually often in our top 5 top speed runners. So is Colt, which surprises me a little bit as well. Some of his decision-making was excellent on the weekend, I thought. I really like his kicking. He does take some risky kicks on, but he's got great technique, kicks them low. And for a player who I don't think is great one-on-one, he was on... Am I right to say he was on 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁 for most of the match, George?
Yeah, they had to swap because I think Turner started on 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀, but I think they had to change. Right. Turner was... Yeah, so hard to say.
I thought one-on-one he was as strong in this game as I've seen him for quite a while. And speaking of leadership, I think his leadership has been terrific as well. As I've talked about it a lot, I really put a lot of stock in players who play well. I have great respect for players who play well when the team's playing poorly, and he has played at a consistently high level all season. And he did again on the weekend. He can't have got too many coaches' votes in his career, so I was really thrilled to see he got one. I'd love to know who gave him that, whether it was Muir or Goody. The other thing, while I think of it, is I have to say I just loved seeing Oscar McDonald out there, one of my all-time favourite players. I even cheered him. I got a few curious looks that way when I applauded one of his marks, and it made me laugh to think of him going back and slotting that goal as easily as he did. And I thought he looked in great nick as well. And yeah, I would much respect for 𝗟𝗏𝗀. I think coming back from two really, really long-term serious injuries and getting back after being delisted from an AFL club and from 2 AFL clubs he deserves a lot of respect, and it was great to see him out there. And at one point they were on each other. Tom Mack and 𝗟𝗏𝗀, Tommy was defending 𝗟𝗏𝗀 as a forward, so I'm sure the McDonald family will be dining out on that for a while. So Tom McDonald I thought was another fantastic performance. J02 is spot on.
Supreme Demon says, how good were both Max, Gawn and Kozzy Pickett yesterday? Kozzy Pickett reminded me of a prime Jeff the Wizard Farmer yesterday with the way he played and impacted the game against Freo. George Kozzy was outstanding. He proved to Fremantle he's worth every one of those first-round picks they're going to have to give us for him. 5 goals, 2 from 24 possessions. Just superb. Max winding down the clock with his 28 disposals and 10 clearances. Just needs to kick those goals. For the love of God, someone just run past him for a handball. The first one that he missed from 20 metres out, 30 metres out, there was no one near him. Anyone could have run past him to take that, and I would have been okay with that.
Yeah, the 2 best players on the ground without any doubt. That was just a true cameo performance by Kozzy in particular. He just did exactly what he wanted to do. The whole game was just what people go through the gates to see at AFL football. Max was brilliant all day, particularly in that last quarter with the marks that he was taking. But I'm absolutely with you, Andy. If there's anyone with a range, Max, do not kick the ball. And it simply astounds me that we've got people who are kicking coaches in the club, and he still has the same style of kicking as what he did years ago, and it doesn't work. So I was a little bit furious. A lot of people were around me as well when he was kicking from what was about 30 metres out in the last quarter, when it could have actually sealed the game. Kozzy was 5 metres away from him, and there wasn't a Freo player within 10 metres of Kozzy. All he had to do was handball it to Kozzy, and it would have been nailed beautifully. Max, just look around. Giving it off is the best option rather than trying to kick.
Yeah, it's interesting that player ratings. They really, apparently, that Willow was responding to a question about that is, yes, he was super influential, but if we'd lost the game, people would have been pointing at those 2 misses, wouldn't they? It's like, particularly that one that you mentioned, 30 metres out. And but I just wanted to say, speaking of kicking at goals, is, Track had another good game, terrific. His snap goal was brilliant and really important point in time, and so was Kozzy's first goal. That was so critical. We got a goal before they got their second. I thought that we didn't allow them to get their noses in front. But out of the blue, Track decides to go around his body from a set shot from 40 metres on an angle. What the hell was that about?
Yeah,
That was bad,
exactly. What the hell was that
Like,
about?
it didn't even look like he was committed to doing it when he was doing it. I haven't seen him ever do it before. And then, like, I wouldn't mind him doing it if that's what he was doing all the time. But it just struck me as someone who's got no confidence at all in his goal kicking ability.
Maybe we've hired Harry Mackay's goal kicking coach.
And Draper.
And Draper, another
he's
one.
doing it as well.
Not anymore for him.
Not for a while. I hate to see that. It was good news that 𝗟𝗏𝗀, though, was not as bad as they feared.
Yeah.
Let's get on to the 𝗚cie game. The 𝗚cie Demons suffered a heavy 53-point defeat at the hands of an undefeated GWS Giants outfit on Saturday afternoon at 𝗚cie Fields. And despite fielding 15 AFL listed players, 𝗚cie had their strongest lineup of the season to date. The Demons are overwhelmed from the outset and were outclassed in all areas of the game. GWS set the tone early, booting the first 5 goals of the match and racing to a 30-point lead at quarter time. Their slick ball movement, speed and efficient forward entries consistently broke down 𝗚cie's defensive structures. Demons briefly responded in the second term, managing 4 goals, including majors from Riley Baldy and Oliver Seston. Though the battle around the stoppages remained relatively even, 𝗚cie failed to make the most of their chances, often breaking down when pushing forward. After the main break, the Giants reasserted their dominance, piling on 8 goals in the third quarter to effectively ice the contest. A slightly more productive final term from 𝗚cie produced 4 goals and helped slightly narrow the final margin, but then the game was well out of reach by then. If the selectors were looking for forwards to add to their mix for next week, they would be disappointed. Axed pair Bailey Fritsch and Jacob van Rooyen were quiet, with Fritsch kicking 1 major from 11 disposals and van Rooyen scoring 1 goal from his 9 touches. The former, that's Fritsch, was also taken off at the final break, suggesting he might also be under consideration for a return given the short turnaround to Anzac Day Eve. And Jack Billings collected 26 touches and played a solid game through the midfield, although his kicking lacked depth and penetration. Oliver Seston, one of the few bright sparks, finishing with 23 touches and a classic goal out of defence. Bailey Laurie was energetic all day, recorded 19 disposals, game high 11 tackles, and kicked 2 of 𝗚cie's goals. Judd McVie returned from a pre-season hamstring injury, showing good attack on the footy with 19 disposals before being rested at 3/4 time. And Jai Cully also had the ball 19 times and was handy. Will Verrell battled hard as the lone ruckman in the absence of Tom Campbell, finishing with 16 disposals and 25 hitouts, despite being outsized. George, any further commentary?
Yeah, there wasn't much to take from this game. GWS had 15 players, as well as Melbourne having 15 AFL listed players, but their players were simply too skillful, too good. It's not surprising in a way, because GWS first have got such a great depth of talent, and the spillovers into their second side are just as equally talented. But they completely blitzed 𝗚cie. Their kicking was just sublime to watch, particularly their set shots for goal. They had 9 goals won to half time. 9 goals won. 3/4 time was 17 goals 3. And some of their forward kicking was just superb to watch. There wasn't really much to enthuse Melbourne supporters. Jeffo started in the back line, surprisingly, finished up forward for a couple of small stints, but did absolutely nothing, missed a couple of easy marks that he should have taken. Second efforts have gone back to what he was doing before, non-existent. JVR just looks completely out of sorts. It didn't do anything for the first 3 quarters. They moved him in the final quarter when we were kicking with the breeze. He was working up the ground, which was good, but he just hasn't got that spark and that jump that we want. Fritsch, quite frankly, was awful. Despite what kicking a goal, it was just the same old Fritsch. 10 metres behind his player, walking behind his opponent as they raced up the ground. I have a sneaking suspicion he actually did a hamstring in the third quarter. At around the 18-minute mark, he sort of clutched for his hamstring. He played on for another 10 minutes, but then didn't come back on the ground. So the commentators thought he might have been taken to the MCG, but Henderson was the emergency for the game, not Fritsch. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him as the suspicious injury when the injury reports come out for this week. Kentfield did a couple of good things in the back line, some really, really strong marks, but I think this was only his second or third game, so a lot of work to go there, but at least that looks like we've got something to work with there. Billings was Billings again, can't kick 30 or 40 metres, lots of cheap chipping kicks. He has no place in the seniors if we're trying to institute a running game, because if he ever gets a mark, he always goes back from the mark and slows things up, and he's still doing the same sort of thing at Casey. So for Binman and his statistics, there was nothing to take out of this game. Riley Bonner had 17 possessions in the third quarter alone, 17 possessions, and as the commentators said, not one of them went forward. It was just chip, back and forth. I think Casey were trying to just limit the amount of damage that GWS were able to do on the scoreboard just by denying them having the ball. But there wasn't much to take out of this game, really all round. So disappointing. The final score really showed it. Aidan Johnson's competitive, but really is missing that bit of class. Hopefully, working in the AFL system, he might be able to build up a bit more for us. Cully continues to impress me. He seems to be on limited time. He's off the ground for long periods of time at the moment. But when he's playing in the midfield, I think he's got a lot more upside than what someone like Laurie has at the moment to be able to take that next step up. I think he will do so sooner or later. I think even the commentators mentioned that once he gets a bigger tank, he will make the jump up to AFL reasonably quickly.
All right, let's get into changes. Both Bailey Fritsch and Judd McVie were rested in the final term of the Casey game, and George, you've said that maybe Fritsch has a 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 injury. Others thought maybe that was because he might, because of the short turnaround, be 𝗟𝗂𝗍𝒂 Eve, but we'll see. We'll watch this space. Coach Simon Goodwin today suggested that both May and McVie were good chances to return to the side, but the former, Stephen May, had a few boxes to tick before being selected after being a late withdrawal last week with the groin injury. Disco Turner left the field with a suspected concussion. We now know that it was concussion. He's gone into protocols, so he will not return for the Anzac Eve, and they said he may be available for the West Coast game. Doug Reamer asked, if Turner doesn't get up due to concussion, which we know he doesn't, do we persist with a smaller backline or bring in Adams alongside McVie? That might free Rivers to move up the ground. That might be a moot point if May comes in. It's a big man, followed by George. Your changes, if any, this week for the match against the Tigers.
Well, sounds like Steve May's coming back, huh?
Well, they said he has to tick boxes, but then again, last week when he was a bit ginger, they said he's fine to play, and then all of a sudden he didn't play. So. Yeah,
so hopefully he comes back in, and he's obviously in for Turner, isn't he? So that works out well from that perspective. And I can't see any other changes. One thing Goody's been pretty consistent at over the years is rewarding players who do what they're told. I suspect most of them did what they were told. I find it really hard to get a bead on Sharp. I want to like him, and I want to think that he's and I thought he did some good things in this match.
He does some nice things, but then it's not the whole game or enough.
And to be fair, he was the sub, so it was interesting. Yeah. He worked hard. How did Laurie play? Sorry, George, did you say
it was just a Laurie game. And Laurie's difficulty is he's being played in the midfield.
Yeah, right.
So where do you put him?
Well, and I think my theory with Laurie, I think he's a very, very good VFL player. and does all the right things, gets all the possessions, all that. I just don't think when he gets to AFL level,
it's starting to be a long, particularly when you compare him with 𝗟𝗀. 𝗟𝗀's coming into his own, playing some really top level football. He'd be in the All Australian conversation at the moment. I know that's a big call, but for a small defender, his numbers would stack up with Quaynors or anyone at the moment.
If we were a top 4 team, yes, but not as a
but
bottom
they were
2
drafted
team.
in the same
year,
yes, those two together. Yes. And Seston is the one that I reckon is a good chance at some point of coming in sooner or later. But I think McVie will come back in. I think they'll really want McVie, and so if they think he's fit enough, and I was a bit surprised that Colt got selected ahead of him, but I could only presume that it was because they didn't quite think McVie was quite ready, whereas Colt had been ready for a couple of weeks by all accounts and was chomping at the bit and ready to go. So I think McVie will come in. I think he's a really important player to Melbourne, particularly with this method that we're trying to implement. He is, I think, one of our 10 most critical players, even arguably top 5 most critical players. That's how highly I rate him, but 2, how important I think he is into the way we want to play. And this might be a long bow, but I think he's our Nick Dacos. I'm not saying he's as good as Nick Dacos, but I think he is our quarterback from the back. I'm really looking forward for seeing McVie and Windsor play in the same back line. Who comes out for McVie, I'm not entirely sure. It's always a hard one, but I think McVie will come in, and obviously Mays. So that's 2 changes. So Turner out. So who would come out then for McVie if he comes in?
Melcham, Sharp.
Sharp. Yeah, Sharp, but then you've got the sub thing. Yeah, Sharp. It could be Sharp, but then you've got the sub issue. I don't think Melcham will come out, but he could go to,
Howes maybe.
Yeah, that's the one. Howes maybe. Yeah, it could be Howes. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the preview. For the start of the year, you told me that the Tigers would be a game clear of us on the ladder as we head into the 10th Anzac Eve game between the two sides. I would have said you were bonkers, and that to thank your mother for the rabbits for feeding into my already rampant and incurable MFC SS. The young Tigers will be brimming with confidence after defeating the Suns be brimming with confidence after defeating the Suns that they can snare another win early in the seasons over a Demons outfit that has struggled all year but has finally got on the board for 2025. Demons will be striving to win back-to-back games for the first time since July last year, and in the process leap to the top of the bottom 4, and that is the prize on offer for winning on Anzac Eve. That's the George, followed by Big Man, your preview of the match against the Tigers at the MCG.
I wouldn't read anything particularly into the Tigers' performance last week. They came up against the Suns. Unfortunately, the Suns absolutely dominated them in the first quarter, absolutely dominated. Rowell in particular. He was on track for some incredible number of contested possessions in the first quarter and then dropped off dramatically. It seemed very, very strange to me because the Suns have been playing very good football. But the previous week, the Suns played North Melbourne in a 34, nearly 35-degree game at 12:30 in the afternoon in the Barossa Valley. And while they won by some extraordinary amount, you can't expect to come up the following week after having played in those conditions. And it wasn't surprising, North Melbourne's performance this week as well, when they were soundly beaten. So, like I said, I wouldn't read too much into Richmond's success last week. The loss of Bolter will affect them seriously, or actually it'll be to our advantage because that problem that we talked about, the lack of tools that we've got at the moment in the forward line, will be not shown up because Bolter was probably one of their best players last week.
Their best player, I thought he was fantastic. Really.
Yeah, take him out of it, and even with the Suns' position, they would have quite easily have won that game. So. Our rucking is going to be interesting. Nankervis is just a grunt player, and he will just attack Max the whole game. Hopefully, he's not too affected, but Fullerton's really going to struggle against Ryan Sampson, Ryan, who's the next Richmond tall ruckman, and starting to get some decent game time, but he's just tall, and the Richmond mids are pretty slim. It comes down to Taranto and not much else these days. So hopefully our mids will get on top of them. But overall, if we play in a similar sort of vein to what we did last week, we should do Richmond rather easily.
All right, big man.
Interesting game. Tactically, they like to rebound as well. They're second in rebounds, 50s per game, but they're ranked first in least opponent rebounds, 50s per game, which is an interesting combination of statistics. But they also kick the ball a hell of a lot less than us. So we're averaging, We're averaging disposals 362.7. So they've got kicking? 207 to 198. That's not quite as big a margin as I thought it was. But in terms of, for them, some of their numbers look horrible in terms of their low rankings. They're 17th in disposals per game, so they're a bit more straight line than us. They're 18th for tackles per game, which is good that they're below us for that. They're 18th of inside 50s per game, and that was the number that I was looking at in terms of inside 50s. We're averaging 51.5 inside 50s this season. They're only averaging 41.8. That's a massive difference, 10 inside 50s per game difference. They've won one more game than us. That's worth remembering. So their scoring efficiency must be reasonable when they get it in, but that's a super low number in terms of the number of inside 50s. So they might rebound from 50. It's a weird sort of combination. The second in rebounds, 50s per game, but then they don't get it inside 50, obviously. That doesn't translate to inside 50s just to get into their forward half. And remembering defensive half and forward half, the line is literally the centre line. So anything on the scoring side is the offensive side, and defensive side's the opposite. This surprised me as well, is the 16th 14th in least. What is what was it? 18th. No. 18th in tackles. I mentioned that before, which doesn't strike me as a very Richmond thing. So that's it'll be really interesting to see, whether they bring the pressure, because I haven't seen them that often this year, but when they have played well, like every team that plays well was when they brought the heat. In that Blues game in the first round of the season, it was all the heat. In this game, I only saw the first quarter and then the last quarter, Georgia, this one just gone. In the last quarter, they stopped to a walk against the Suns. They were like, if they were a horse and you were betting on them, they're in the lead, you'd be certainly worried about running down. So, this game is a huge one for both clubs. That comment before about sort of peaking for particular matches, I wouldn't be surprised if both teams have targeted this game to be in optimal shape. I think we set up really well against them. I'm looking forward to going. It's a real highlight, this game, isn't it? And I really hope we run at them. We run at them hard. Again, for me, the key will be the same as I said last week about the key for this game that just we're reviewing from the weekend gone, is our pressure intensity and really getting up in their grill and controlling the momentum, using controlled possessions ourselves. We're doing that really well, and I think we'll continue to do it. And of course, taking advantage of the momentum when we get it and putting it on the scoreboard. And I hope Kozzy has another day out, because again, that was just something to watch. And just, the comparison to the Wiz is a really, really good one. And it brought to mind that performance by the Wiz, one of my all-time favourite matches, 10 second half goals against Collingwood at the MCG. It wasn't quite at that level, but, geez, it was impressive, Koz's game. So let's hope that's how he plays, puts in another game like that on Thursday night. Only 2 more sleeps and we're there.
Wow. I know, be quick turnaround, and that's where I think we're going to leave this one for tonight, and we'll be back next week to break down our Anzac Eve game against the Tigers in just a couple of sleeps' time. And if you want to listen to the show live as it happens, please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer who sneakily got in. Thank you to Left Arm of God. Thank you to our caller tonight. It was Rob from Maidstone. As always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted those questions and comments. Thank you to B-Man's nemesis, the Pearl, KLV, Doug Reamer, B.O. What was his name? Bobo. I have got Bob written here, but it wasn't Bob. It's Bobo. BW511, Clintosaurus, Demon WA, Dutch Demon, Spirit of Norm Smith, D Old Fart, Ghost Rider, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁, Supreme Demon, Red and Blue Rising, Bring Back Pow, 𝗪cie𝗰𝗶𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁, Whispering Jack, Santiago, Lazy Dice, Buck Naked, Phil C, Monocular, Travi14, D-Star9, The Ox, Demon Jinx, Sam6172, Rooster Far, Rollo 2, Alex No Fancy Name, Go Lordy, Mandalorian, Jane02, Jaden H10, Youngblood, What Say What, D Positive, Master Chief, Red and Bluebeard, and Demon Spirit. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and B-Man. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you that shout out on the next show. Go Demons!
Red Leggers.